Hi, this is Travis Kraus. If you are watching this video, first of all, thank you. I have not added any new content to this channel in quite a long time. I've had some pretty major life changes in the last few years. I went back to school and got my master's degree. I've moved multiple times. I've had a couple of more kids. I've had some major career changes. It's all really good stuff, but I've not been on here in quite a while to create any new content for this channel, but I've been feeling a stirring in my heart recently that I need to get back into it and share something with you. I wasn't sure what to share or where to start, but I feel led to share with you the story of how God got me and my wife out of $100,000 in student loan debt. Student loan debt is a huge problem for a lot of people around the country. I used to be a financial aid coordinator, and so I worked with a lot of college students who were taking on a lot of debt, and I could totally relate to their situation because a lot of times they're, needing to borrow money to cover living expenses. They can't afford to pay their bills and go to school and all this stuff, and so they're taking out extra loans to pay their bills, feed their children, whatever. And I totally went through that, and so I totally understand what that's all about. And when I was doing that job, my heart's desire was to try to help people from getting into the same situation that I had gotten into, and kind of avoid some of those pitfalls. But I'm going to tell you my story. It's a story of how we got ourselves into some big trouble, but how God was faithful and came through for us. So this is not a story of how I pulled myself up by my own bootstraps and I worked hard and I got myself out of this mess. I worked 5 jobs and we ate nothing but mac and cheese for a year and we managed to pay off our debt. I mean, this is a story of how God came through for us and just did some crazy unexpected things that got us out from this enormous burden. So let me set the stage for you. So it's the year 2009. 2009 was a really difficult year for me. I had recently graduated from college the year prior. I was not making much money at all. My wife and I both had pursued these liberal arts degrees that weren't very lucrative. It was difficult to get a good paying job with the degree that I had chosen. That's probably a whole other story in itself. Maybe I'll do a separate video just to talk about that story, how my degree choices and some of the consequences of that, and then how God kind of navigated me through that into where I'm at today and how I've come out on the other side. But anyway, recently graduated from college. We have 2 kids at this point, young kids. They're like 3 and 1, or maybe they're 4 and 2. I can't remember, something like that. I think 4 and 2. So they were pretty young. We were living in this rental house. We could not afford the rent anymore. We had tapped out all of our sources of debt. I mean, we had a lot of credit card debt. We had borrowed a lot in student loans to try to get through college, and had kind of relied on those to pay bills, and now those weren't coming in anymore, and I wasn't able to make enough money at my job to pay the bills. And so we were just really in a bad situation, and a lot of it was just my own fault, my own poor decisions. So we ended up moving in with my in-laws. And fortunately, I have wonderful in-laws. They're great. I mean, I really consider them like another set of parents for myself. They've been like parents to me. But I didn't necessarily want to live with them. I still wanted to have my own place, my own space. But we moved in with my in-laws. They offered to help us out. I was working 2 jobs. So I was working as a patient transporter at a hospital during the week. And then on the weekends, I was working as a security guard. So I was just working all the time and still not making much money. I mean, neither one of those jobs really pays very much. And even combined, they didn't really make a lot of money. But I'm just working all the time. I didn't really see my family that much. I had no idea how I was going to get out of this situation, because the choices I had made, there just weren't really a lot of opportunities. I didn't know what I was going to do for a career. I was exploring different things. I was applying to different things, and nothing really seemed to be panning out. But, here we are, stuck with my in-laws. My wife's very depressed, about our situation, and I'm feeling like I'm probably the one mostly responsible for it, for why we're stuck with my in-laws instead of living in our own house. So feeling pretty awful about everything, kind of feeling some despair, feeling some guilt, like, man, I have really messed things up, and I've gotten my family into this situation, and now they're suffering as a result. So one day, I'm just continuing to, struggle with, thinking about, all right, am I going to be stuck living with my in-laws the rest of my life? And just one day out of the blue, I feel like I hear God say to me, I want you to pray for a debt-free house. And, so just to give you some background, you might be wondering, well, God spoke to me. Well, how does God speak? God speaks in a lot of different ways. If you read the Bible, he speaks in all different ways. Sometimes he speaks in really dramatic ways, like Moses and the burning bush. There's like a bush on fire and God's speaking from the bush. Sometimes God speaks through dreams, through visions, through just all kinds of ways. But I really believe that God is speaking to us all the time. And a lot of times we're just not tuned into it, and we don't recognize, what does God sound like? From my experience, God doesn't have this booming, deep James Earl Jones voice. Travis, I am the Lord thy God. Thou shalt do my will. He has not done that with me. I'm not ruling that out. I think that's totally possible, but that's not how he's spoken to me. A lot of times, the way God speaks to me is through the what's oftentimes called the still small voice. This is if you read in the Bible, in the story of Elijah, where he goes off alone with God, and then God sends all these things. I think he sends like an earthquake, and he sends like this and that, and these big miraculous displays, but God was not in those events. And then there was silence, and Elijah listens, and he hears the still small voice of God, like God speaking very gently to him. And, I think that that's generally the way that God speaks to me most of the time. There have been other ways, but I usually have to like unplug and shut off all the noise and just listen, and I don't necessarily hear an audible voice, but what'll happen oftentimes is there'll be something that just kind of drops into my thoughts, into my mind. It's usually a thought from outside of myself. It's a phrase, or it's words, or something. But anyway, I was just seeking the Lord, and that was what I heard, was I want you to pray for a debt-free house. So at the time, I'm like, a debt-free house? Like, that's crazy. Like, I can't even, we're up to our eyeballs in debt. We're stuck living with my in-laws. I'm making peanuts, from these 2 jobs that I'm working all the time. There's no way that we can afford any house, let alone a debt-free house. But I felt very clearly like this was from God, like that I'm supposed to pray for this. So I did. So I prayed for it, and I started to, just trust God. Like, okay, God, you're God. You know what you're doing. If anybody can pull this off, it's you. I don't see how it can possibly be done, but let's see what you got. I shared this with my wife. I don't think she's really, I think she's having an even harder time believing it. My wife's very realistic. She's very much a realist, and I think by that point, it was just like, all right, whatever, I'll believe it when I see it, But anyway, so I'm praying for a debt-free house. I'm trusting somehow God's going to make this happen. A few months later, my wife's grandma, who over the years had saved up a lot of money. She just was very miserly, very frugal. She saved a lot of money. I don't even know how much she had, but she always just was, never spending money on herself. She never like spent anything on herself other than just what she needed to survive. Just the bare minimal amount of food and paying the bills and stuff. But she just saved up a lot of money, and she would oftentimes give money to people who needed it. She financed multiple college educations. Sometimes she would buy a vehicle for somebody who needed one. But she wanted to help us. So we started, really, I should say my wife. I was working all the time. I didn't have time to do anything. I think I was working my security job when my wife went looking at houses. She and her parents looked at some houses. But anyway, after looking at multiple houses, they found this house that was a foreclosure. And it was in Columbia, Tennessee. And it was, I'm not going to go into too much detail about the house. I mean, it was definitely a fixer-upper. It needed a lot of work done to it. Definitely had a lot of damage and neglect over the years. But it was a house. And what ended up happening was my wife's grandma was able to pay cash for that house. It was got a very good price for it, and paid cash for it. So, and then just like gifted that house to us basically. Like, so here out of the blue, we get a house, we don't have to live with my in-laws anymore. Around the same time, I actually don't remember what happened first, if it was the house or the job, but I did end up getting a job that paid more than both of the other jobs I was working combined. I got a job as a financial aid coordinator at a college. This was a kind of job, fortunately, you don't really need a college degree to work in this field, or at least maybe what I should say is it doesn't really matter what your degree is. You could have a degree in underwater basket weaving, and you could probably, get a job working as a financial aid coordinator. So anyway, so that was, I got that job, and that was a huge blessing. That was really unexpected, and it was not something that I was on my radar at all. I'd never even considered working in that field. But looking back, I feel like it was God sentencing me to work that job as kind of like a way of like, all right, this is like a way of reforming you, like of educating you, rehabilitating you. Like you got yourself into this mess with debt, with student loans and stuff. So I'm going to sentence you to work as a financial aid coordinator for a period of time so that you're going to have to work with students that are like yourself. And, you can at least provide some support and some advice to them and help them to avoid some of the pitfalls that you got yourself into. So anyway, so I got that job right around the same time that we got this debt-free house. So here we have a house that we're living in, no mortgage. The only thing we ever had to pay on it was the taxes, the property taxes, which were not very much. So we're living in a completely paid off house. I finally got a job, but we still have the student loan debt. That didn't go anywhere. We did a number of different things. We did pay on the loans. Obviously, we made our payments, but considering we owed like over $100,000 in student loan debt, they didn't budge at all. I mean, if you know anything about loans and you know anything about interest, I mean, the amount that you're accruing in interest versus the principal is just like, over the lifetime of the loan, I mean, you're paying a lot in interest. But, we made payments on the loans and they didn't budge. It pretty much just stayed the same. We tried doing different things. We tried kind of doing a side hustle, like home business type things. We tried some different ways to make money on the side, but we never really could make enough money to put a dent in those loans. One of the things that we did for a while, we set up an income-based repayment plan, which is something that the federal government offers. You can get your loans set up on an income-based repayment where you only pay based on how much you make. So if you don't make a lot of money, or if you make no money, like if you're unemployed, then in some cases they will reduce your payments to zero on on some of those loans. So that was something that we took advantage of for a while, just because, you know, my career has fluctuated a lot over the years. I mean, you know, even working as a financial aid coordinator, that didn't make a lot of money. And I didn't stay in that job forever. I actually went through a season of unemployment for a while after that. But, you know, needless to say, no matter what we did, the loans were still there. You know, we were in a paid off house. The loans were still there. we weren't able to shake free of this debt. At one point, I don't remember exactly when, but I had a dream. I had a dream that I was on the computer and I was looking at NSLDS, which is the National Student Loan Data System. If you are a student or former student and you've taken out any federal aid, you've received any federal aid, whether it's Pell Grants or federal student loans, there's a record of that on NSLDS. You can access it for yourself. Like, you can log into NSLDS and you can look at your own record of what student loans you owe the government. Financial aid administrators at colleges can look up this information to see if you've defaulted on your loans or not, and if they're able to give you any more. But anyway, I had a dream. I was looking at NSLDS and I'm looking at the record of our loans, and I see this huge amount, and like, there it is, there's our debt. And anyway, in the dream, I click the refresh button to refresh the page, and all of a sudden the amount's zero. And I'm like, that's cool. You know, like, instantly the amount turns to zero. It goes from over 100,000 to zero. And then I woke up and that was it. And that was the dream. And I'm like, what does that mean? You know, like I said, God speaks through a lot of different ways. And I know that he has spoken to me through dreams as well. I've had multiple dreams that, you know, they weren't just pizza dreams. Sometimes you have a weird dream and you're like, yeah, it was the pizza last night. But the more I started to write down those dreams and pay attention to them, the more I realized, that wasn't a pizza dream. That was, you know, God was saying something to me. Some of them are pizza dreams. You know, some of your dreams, they are just nonsense and you can forget about them. But I would say probably more than you realize, you know, God is probably speaking to you through your dreams and you just don't know it. But I took that dream as a word from the Lord that somehow he was going to get us out of this debt. Again, it looked impossible, you know, unless we were going to win the lottery or all of a sudden I was going to get this amazingly well-paying job. It just didn't look possible no matter what we did. But I trusted it, and I shared it with my wife, told her the dream, and just kind of held on to it for a while. You know, like, God's going to get us out of this debt somehow, some way. I don't know how, I don't know when, but when he does it, it's going to be him. It's not going to be because I worked so hard or you know, anything that I can take credit for. It's something that only he will be able to take credit for at the end of the day. So fast forward a few years, we actually had to move in with my in-laws again, not because of financial reasons, but because my wife was having some health concerns at the time, and we needed some help with just watching our kids. I was in grad school at the time. I had gotten into a master's degree program. This time didn't have to take out any student loans for it. The college where I was working had a really good tuition reimbursement plan, and so they were paying for my school, so that was awesome. But, you know, I'm working all the time and I'm doing school, you know, and once again, I'm super busy, and my wife's sick, you know, and she's having a lot of health issues, and we need help with the kids, you know, like my in-laws are coming over and they're taking kids to their house and stuff. And they finally just offered to let us move in with them so that my wife could get the care that she needed, and, you know, we could get help with the kids, and I could, like, finish school successfully and not be pulled in so many different directions. So we moved in with them, and our house kind of sat there vacant. You know, we weren't staying in the house anymore. I would visit it occasionally, you know, like maybe on the weekends, go there just to kind of maintain some things and whatnot. At some point, I don't remember when it was, but we realized that we weren't going to be staying at that house, and we felt like we were supposed to fix it up, you know, fix everything else that's still wrong with it, fix a lot of the cosmetic issues with the house, and put it on the market and sell it. We felt like God was kind of steering us in that direction. I don't remember exactly how this all panned out, but it occurred to us that we could sell that house and pay off our loans with it, with the money that we got from the sale of that house. When we finally sold the house, we actually ended up getting exactly the amount that we needed to pay off the loans and then a little bit extra beyond that. So I remember the day that all of a sudden we have all this money in our bank account, which I've never seen this amount of money in my bank account before in my life. But we go home and we log in to all of our different lender sites to make a payment and put in a payment amount that's just this outrageous amount and press the button to submit the payment, and it's gone. Like the loan is paid in full. We did this for our federal loans, and we also had some private loans as well that we paid off. But I can't tell you just how crazy of a feeling it is to pay something like that off like in an instant. Not too long after that, I went and I checked NSLDS. Again, this is the National Student Loan Data System. This is the database where everybody's federal loans are, that information is held. And logged in, and it was zero. I had a printout of the before and the after. Like I printed before we paid off the loans, what we owed, and then I had to print out the after as well of what it said, and it said zero. So anyway, that was the fulfillment of that dream. That was, that was God basically in a single day getting rid of our debt, getting rid of our student loan debt. I thought we were going to be under that burden for the rest of our lives. I didn't think there was going to be any way that we could pay those things off. And just like that, they were just gone. It wasn't through anything that we did. It was all God. And I think the coolest part, and I didn't realize this until afterwards, but going back to that original word I had about the debt-free house, God told me to pray for a debt-free house. But there was a double meaning to the word debt-free. He meant you're not going to need to take on any debt to pay for this house. But he also meant that this house is going to make you debt-free. So when I realized that, it was just like it just blew my mind. I couldn't believe it. But it was just amazing, and it was just this burden was lifted all of a sudden. So I don't want to give you the impression that, all right, now we're homeless and living with my in-laws again. It's probably a story best left to a whole other video in itself, but it wasn't long after that I got another job that paid like twice as much as what I was making at the job I was working at the time, and we moved out and got our own place again. So why am I telling you all this? Well, I hope that I can encourage you that, it doesn't matter how big of a mess you've gotten yourself into, that God loves you. He sees everything that's going on. He sees what you're going through, and he will make a way for you where there is none. You might not be able to see a way out of your situation, but he knows the way out of your situation, and you just need to trust him. You just need to put it in his hands. One of the biggest things I hope you get out of this is that it doesn't matter if it's your fault, okay? If you have an idea of God, that he's just sitting up there and he's like, all right, you got yourself into this mess. Now it's your job to get yourself out. Like, if that's your idea of God, then that is a lie. That is a false God. That is not the real God. If that were the case, then we're all screwed. Like, we're all just hopelessly screwed if that's the way the Lord is. But that's not how he is. He's a God of compassion. He sees your situation, and it doesn't matter whether you created this mess yourself or something just happened to you that wasn't your own fault or whatever. He's got a way for you. You know, it might not look exactly like my situation. I think, we need to allow God to be creative and work in a unique way in each of our lives. So I don't want you to think that, oh, well, God's going to give me a debt-free house and I'm going to use that to pay off my debt. Like, he's probably going to have a totally different way for you. You know, what he does is different for every person. But I hope that you get out of this the fact that God is faithful, he's compassionate, he loves you, and he will make a way for you no matter how big of a mess you're in, okay? So I would just encourage you right now, wherever you're at, stop what you're doing, okay? And you can just say, Jesus, Lord, I've gotten myself into a huge mess. I don't know what I'm going to do. This is my fault. Maybe it's not my fault. Maybe something happened to me, but whatever, it doesn't even matter. It doesn't matter if it's my fault. I know that you are God, you are Lord, and you have a way for me. And so I just ask that you would clear away the noise, clear away the distractions, clear away the noise in my own heart, and help me to hear what you're saying to me and show me the way that you have for me. Show me the way that you have for my family. Lead us where we need to be. Lord, it's all yours. My life is yours. Everything is yours. I surrender to you. Just let him be in control and let him be God and make room for a miracle in your life. All right. I hope this was an encouragement to you. I love you, and I'll talk to you soon.